For those of you that don't know me, I'm Tom Trujillo. I'm currently Commodore of the Trans-Pacific Yacht Club through this current race cycle through next year, enjoying my job a lot. Two of my fellow flag officers are on the call, Bill Guilfoyle, our Vice Commodore, and Alan Andrews, our Rear Commodore. I haven't looked down the participation list to see if our Junior Staff Commodore, Jim Eddy, is here, but let's acknowledge Jim Eddy also as a Junior Staff Commodore who's been a great help in giving a lot of advice. There's a sprinkling of board members on the list who I'm not going to introduce, but I want to thank you, my fellow flag officers, and also the board members that are on the call, and Randy is a board member, taking on the seminar. Thanks for all your work. We've got a very involved and very energetic flag and board this year, and I think it's going to lead towards a really, really good race coming up. We're up to 45 entries as of today, although I just got a yacht scoring email a couple minutes ago and I didn't see it. Maybe we have 46, but we were at 45 this afternoon and signed up already. So that's really, really great. We're really excited about that. I'm not going to talk too much. I want the speakers, and Randy's going to take over in just a second. I do quickly want to just throw a shout out and a thank you to our sponsors. Just going to mention their names quickly so that we know who is helping us support the running of this race. Pasha, the freight company that runs the big ships back and forth. Whittier Trust, Cal Maritime, San Diego Boat Works, Bosun's Locker, Wren Spooner, Novamar Insurance, Ocean Navigator, Dave Costello and his whole crew at Avalon Rafts, John Sangmeister, our good friend and owner of Gladstones, who always helps out. And somebody new this year is Regatta Gear, excuse me. And pretty soon you'll be seeing on the website a new link to a really amazing bunch of gear that we're going to have personalized for Transpac this upcoming year. We're stepping up to a different vendor for apparel and for all those sort of knickknacks this year, and all the boats are fine to go there for crew shirts as well. We're going to have a link for that, and we're very excited about the possibilities with Regatta Gear, so keep a lookout for that. He's going to be a big sponsor. So that's all I have. Let's get to the meat and matter, and I'll turn it over to our seminar chair and presenter tonight, Randy Smith.
Thank you very much, Tom. And yeah, good evening, everybody. It's great to see you all. I can see your names, but not your faces. Yeah, I took on this project and was really excited about it, and knew I was going to have to call up some friends to help me out. And as you can see by the faces up here, I have some pretty good friends, and we're all really excited to give you a little insight on Transpac tonight. Just a couple housekeeping things. First off, really excited to announce seminar number 2 is coming up February 8th. That's also a Wednesday night, same time. And we have Peter Eisler spending 2 hours with us going over expedition weather. He's going to kind of, the talk is going to be geared more towards navigators, tacticians, watch captains, but everybody's welcome. If you've ever sailed with Peter or listened to him or taken any of his classes through Marine Weather University, you know, if you haven't, you should. But anyways, there's info at the end of the outline that we send out on that, and we should have that up on the Transpac Yacht Club website in the next week or so. More details and sign up on that. So just a little bit of info on all of you tonight. I guess we got up to 219 signups, and the cool thing about everybody on here, many of you I've raced with, against, and known in some cases my whole life. I gotta give a shout to my OEX teammates. There's a number of you on this call, and as I like to say, if you're going to make the effort to get into a life raft, you might as well do it with good friends. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. I have to say hi to JJ Federer, who I've known since I was in elementary school. Grew up sailing Sabbats with her and her brother and sister. So JJ, if you're on the call, hope all's well. And the other thing that was really striking looking at the participant list was so many high level talented sailors. And so it just proves what I've always believed. It doesn't matter how good you are or how good you think you are, you can always learn more. And, that's why we're all here. If you pick up one or two good ideas tonight, that's what it's all about. And so that's all of you. Now the panelists, there's 4 of us. And I did a little research, and I thought it would be fun to list all the boats that we've sailed on. So that's in the outline that you have. But I've raced with and against these guys for over 30 years. Some of them, not you, Brian, you're not old enough yet. But we've done 38 Transpacs between us, and we've raced on 17 different boats and 1 life raft. And so think about all those races and all those boats. Think about all the people that we have sailed with, and the people that we've gotten to learn from. So yeah, that's why I love this sport, and that's why we're doing this tonight. So that is about all I have for opening remarks. So I'm dying to hear what Mr. Haynes, Robbie Haynes, you read a little bit about his background if you don't know it by heart, but Robbie, take it away. Love to hear what you got to say.
All right. Hey, thanks, Randy, and thank you to everyone that's on the call tonight. It's pretty impressive. I'm looking here at 128 or something, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you all some of my thoughts on the last 50 years of doing this race. My first race was on Brisa, which was the Schote 48 with Dennis Schote and Ron Love and Ben Mitchell Sr. And then Blondie, Chance, Vincitori, which was a Santa Cruz 52. And I did about 15 races on Pyewacket. And I've always kind of been known as someone that's likes to prepare well in advance, much to the chagrin of the crew that usually get invited by me 6 to 8 months ahead of time. And most of them say, I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, let alone 6 months from now. But, in my opinion, finding the right guys on these boats, any boat you sail on, is really important. And at the level that we sail Pyewacket, we really like to have really good people. But this call is basically for the whole group, the Cal 40 owners, the Santa Cruz 50 owners, the TP52 sleds, whatever boat you have going to Honolulu. Hopefully this stuff will help in getting you there quicker, safer, and get along. And this whole compatibility issue is so important. And when I pick a crew, that's what I look at probably the most, is will these guys all get along? Of course, I look at ability, but there's been twice in my career with Pyewacket that I've been helping Roy get the crew together. And I think there were 2 times when we made a mistake on picking people, and that just really changed the whole dynamic of the race. So now I'm very, very careful picking the right guys. And luckily with Pyewacket, most of the guys sailed with Roy for years. So it's not a huge job anymore, used to be, but now all the guys always want to come back because Roy treats us well and we do well. And, it's just fun to have all your buddies on the boat together with you. It's one thing that's important, and I'm going to go by my outline, but I'm just going to pick key points here. When you pick a crew, and it doesn't matter what boat it's on, you want to make sure that you have people that, are used to going to sea, because Transpac's 2,300 miles. It's a long way. And that ocean, all of us have flown to Hawaii, but you don't know how long it is until you go on a boat, especially one doing 8 knots. So it's important to have a group that has been sailing before on the ocean, and preferably at night. The nighttime stuff can get a little challenging sometime. Also in preparation, you want to make sure the boat's not going to break down. That's one thing that I've kind of been real careful with the boats that I've had influence on, which are primarily Pyewacket. And that is that you don't break down, because that is a really, really poor excuse for losing. And I remember years ago sailing with a guy named R. Paul Allen, who helped make the Endless Summer movie. He was sailing PCATs, and I never sailed on a catamaran with him, but I remember the day when he said, breaking down is a poor excuse for losing. And that has stuck with me for years. And in the 1970s, I was lucky enough to sail with Lowell North on the Soling, and we would do regattas all over the world together. And he was in the middle, and during the race, there'd be a mast broken or a spinnaker pole or a boom. And all of a sudden we get back to the dock and Lowell would disappear. And the first couple of times it happened, I would ask him, I'd say, hey, where have you been? And he said, well, I was over looking at the guy that broke their mast, or the guy that broke their spinnaker pole. And he said, that's the way you learn. You learn by going and seeing what broke, so that hopefully it'll never happen to you. So that's another thing that stuck with me over the years is Lowell making sure he knew what broke on other people's boats so that it wouldn't happen to him on his boat. You want to make sure you have the proper equipment on board. That's obvious. You want to make sure that you have the proper clothing. As most of us know, the first couple of days on a Transpac can be cold and wet. You want to make sure you have the proper foul weather gear for those 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days. And as you go on in a Transpac, it gets nicer and warmer and more beautiful as you go over. And by the time you're, a day or two out of Honolulu, you're going to be in shorts and a t-shirt 24 hours a day. But make sure you pack the right clothes on a race like this. You want to check and examine all the halyards. You've got a general halyard and you've got a spinnaker halyard that are both key in this race. Main halyard, not so much, providing it's not a disaster. And what I've seen a lot of people do is they've taken the internal halyards out of the mast, and they've, especially for the spinnaker, and they put a block up on top of the mast, and they use an external halyard for the block, or for the halyard, so it doesn't chafe. And many of the older masts when it went through the mast, it would chafe, and you'd have a real problem going over on a race like Transpac, where you have a spinnaker up, most of the way. So they'd put a block at the top of the mast on a tang, and they'd just cleat it down below, and basically there would be no issues for halyard chafe. So that's something that I learned long ago. As far as planning, you want to develop a good watch schedule, and you want to make sure that you have, when picking a crew, and by now some of you may have already chosen your crew for Transpac. You want to have sailors that have expertise, or that's desirable. Have sailors that are good on the bow, or good trimming, or good steering, or just a good all-around guy that can help move sails from side to side. So it's real important to get a crew that not only is compatible, but has ability in the different areas. And one thing that we've always done on Pyewacket, we've always had what we call opposites. We have 8 crew. Well, in order for those 8 crew to have someone on deck that's an expert during the 4 hours that they're on watch, it's real important to have a dedicated bowman, a dedicated trimmer, at least one, and helmsman. And we always have, when we pick the 8, we have 2 bowmen, we have 2 trimmers at least, we have 2 or 3 good helmsmen. Ideally, it's good to have everybody used to steering. And then so that when you're on 4 off watch, you always have one of the good, the experts doing that job. What you don't want to end up doing is having, a helmsman type, a back of the boat type, up on the bow, trying to do the bow, trying to do a jibe or a spinnaker change at night. It's just going to be a disaster. I mean, you're going to lose a lot of time with a wrap spinnaker around the headstay or some other issue. So we always do that. We always have, this is a sample of our watch system. We always, and on Pyewacket, we have 2 or 1 come up on watch every hour. We do not do what we used to do in the old days, where there was 4 on and 4 off, and you'd have 4, sleepy guys coming up on deck, and it takes an hour or more to have them get used to sailing the boat. So what we have are 1 or 2 guys come up. So the transition is a lot less severe than the old days. And this is the way most people are doing it now. They bring 1 or 2 up every hour, and it's still 4 on and 4 off, but there's guys that have been on deck longer during the transition, so that there's not a big problem with coming up on deck with fresh, guys that have been asleep. Also, I think it's good on the watches to start your watches before dinner and before the sun goes down. The first night you round west end of Catalina and you're sailing along and it's probably 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I think it's better to start that first watch, especially before dark and before the watches start, and make sure everything's cleaned up, ready to go. And then every night you may want to do the same thing as you get into the race. It's not as critical. People get used to, doing things and sleeping at different hours, things like that. And you want to, this is one thing that's always not an issue, but it's a kind of a delicate subject, and that is food. One thing that you don't want to do is sail across the Pacific and be miserable when it comes to food. And when I say old days, 15 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, we used to have big, heavy, good, delicious meals. And we've been going more and more, because we've been taking more and more Volvo type guys. We've been going more and more towards freeze dried. And as we all know, freeze dried is not great, but you can supplement it. You can take half heavy food and half freeze dried. And as most people know, the first, quarter of the race, at least, you're on starboard tack, and you can always store the heavy stuff on the starboard side. So it is helping you a little bit on stability. But at least you have half good food and half bad food. Occasionally we go with all freeze dried, and it's not very pleasant. That the freeze dried today is okay. There are certainly good ones and bad ones, and we've tried a bunch of different ones. And after each race, I usually take a poll of what people liked. So it's interesting, this whole food issue. But certainly, if freeze dried isn't your cup of tea, do not worry about that part of it, because the total food weight on the boat isn't much, and it's much, much better to have an enjoyable time sailing across the Pacific with a good breakfast, a good lunch, and a good dinner. Makes the trip. And also we have day bags on Pyewacket. We usually have 10 waterproof. They're long cylinder bags that we put every day's meal in that bag ahead of time. We put breakfast, we put snacks, we put lunch, we put other things. We have an afternoon fellowship hour on Pyewacket every afternoon. And this is sort of from the days of being super serious. We actually take a couple bottles of wine every night. And at about 5 o'clock, all the crew come up on deck. We have a bottle, usually it's Gary Wiseman or Benny Mitchell that picks the wine. And we have fellowship hour. We sit around, and we've got great pictures of Torben Grail steering in the back of the boat with a glass of wine. And somebody cuts up cheese. We have cheese and crackers. And we have about 45 minutes of not only telling sea stories, but also Gary usually explains to all of us where the wine came from. It's just, he does his homework ahead of time, he researches it, and it's just very interesting. And it's just a cool thing we've done on Pyewacket for a long time. And the people that like it most are the Volvo guys, the super serious sailors that come on board Pyewacket and want to know when's fellowship hour. So that's something we've done on Pyewacket, and it's just happens all the time. Let's see. I'm just going through my notes here. Training. One thing to do before Transpac, it's pretty important to take your crew out. And by now you may have chosen the team that's going to go with you to Honolulu. And you may be going in a Cabo race. You may be going in a local Southern California race. It's important to have that team and at least go out and practice with the team, especially overnight. And, the one thing we usually do is we usually take the same crew for Cabo that we do for Transpac. And it's just a good practice. And that's how important, we think it is to have the guys come out and do the races with us prior to the big one, the Transpac. Now, as far as the kelp situation, or sea ropes or fishing line or whatever. You know, there's a lot of stuff out there. And for the owners that have boats that don't catch kelp either on the keel or the rudder, you don't need to worry about this discussion. But for those that catch kelp on the rudder, and even worse on the keel, like our boat, you know, you've got to find a way to take it off. And you either have kelp cutters, or you have a stick that takes it off the rudder, or you have a piece of line that takes it off the keel. But unfortunately, the new keels today have a big protruding bulb, and there's no way to use a rope. So you're going to have to back down. And that's something that you should train for a little bit in one of your practice sessions. You should train for this. You should go and do it. And because sure enough, somewhere across the Pacific, you're going to catch something. And we had, I know in the last Pacific Cup, the Pyewacket had many back downs in that race. So that's important. Do the back down practice ahead of time, because there's an unusually large amount of stuff out in the floating out there. And it's usually not big stuff, you know, hitting a container or things like that. It's usually just rope, fishing line. It can be a bunch of different things. So that's important to do. As far as helmsman, this is prior to the start. It's good to sort of get a good feeling on who your better helmsmen are, and it's inevitable. You're gonna have people that are just more comfortable at night, sailing in no horizon, you know, moonless night. On Transpac board, we try to schedule these races in the moonlight. We have it during the full moon, which is really important. It makes a better race. But you should have people that, you know how to steer in all these conditions. And you should rotate the helmsman in the practice and make sure everybody gets a chance to steer the boat. On Pyewacket, as I mentioned in the outline, we have watch captains that basically call who's going to steer the boat next. And we have sailors that are very competent to steer for an hour and a half. And as far as I'm concerned, I let them steer as long as I think they're doing a good job. Some boats I know have a rotation where every helmsman steers for a half an hour. And then when that half an hour is up, the next guy steers, and the next guy steers, and the next guy steers. That is okay if you have a bunch of equal helmsmen. But if you do have better helmsmen than the other, and they don't get tired, you leave it up to the watch captain or the owner to basically rotate that guy out and do it in a nice way. On Pyewacket, we've been sailing so long together that no one gets their feelings hurt. And there are times when you know, the watch captain will make that call. However, a lot of times the guys will say, "Hey, I'm not doing a good job here. I need a relief." And that's the best of both worlds, when they admit it, that they're not cutting it. And I'll tell you, you know, steering a boat offshore at night when it's sloppy, it's tough, really tough. When there's no moon, you can't see the horizon, you can get vertigo, and it's just, you know, it's tough. So the next thing, you should make sure maximizing the next 6 months between now and the start of Transpac. It's important that you make sure your sail inventory is good. Brian is going to go over that. I don't think it's critical that you have necessarily new sails. You just don't want sails that break. And it's interesting, sails break more in light air than they do in heavy air. If you have a competent crew. If you have a crew that can keep that spinnaker full when you're surfing down the waves, it's very rare when you break them. But when it's light and sloppy and the sails start slatting, that's when you can break spinnakers and break any sail, really. You can break a mainsail that way if you let it slat. But you know, sail shape, I don't think it's important on a mainsail as it is in a spinnaker on a race like this, because the spinnaker's up most of the way. And you want a sail that's not old. You want a sail that's still kind of crispy and new. That's a sail that's going to be up all the way. You may want to have backups for the sails. Certainly your sailmaker can advise your sail inventory. Another area that I think is super important, and Randy, make sure how much time do I have left? Am I there? 5 minutes. Okay. The next area that I think is super important is the bottom finish. You should start planning now when you're going to do the bottom of the boat in prep for Transpac. And it's fine to do, put a new bottom on now if you want. The important thing is that you do the proper prep before the start. So many people I know say, yeah, I just hauled it and put a new bottom on it, and we got a nice new bottom going to Honolulu. Well, most of the time it's not an acceptable bottom, meaning it's not wet sanded. And I'll tell you, with the rule we're sailing under, ORR, you make a lighter boat, you make a bigger sail, you give a boat more stability. All that stuff gets hit. You get hit on the rating. Bottom finish, you do not. So it's very, very important. What we've done in the past is we have a wet sand party where we go to your nearest yard, you haul it out, and you have the whole crew meet you, and you spend 4 hours in the sling. You don't have to block it, in the sling, wet sanding the bottom. And you go to 400. That's probably fine. And the one design racing that I've done in the past, we go to 600 or 1,000 grit paper, but 400 is fine. You do not want to neglect this area because it's what I call free speed. You don't get hit for this, and the boat will go faster with a good bottom. One thing we have on Pyewacket, we have a checklist. This is 3 pages. And before the start, like on an airplane, we go over this list and it gets revised every single race. And we check it and make sure that we've done everything. And it's a really, really handy thing to have.
Hey, Robbie?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt real quick. I forgot to mention in the beginning, this is to all the participants. If you guys and gals have any questions, we have a Q&A box down at the bottom, and Bill is monitoring that. So if you have any questions for Robbie, there's one that just popped up. Just type those in, and when Robbie's done, Bill will ask the questions, and Robbie will hopefully give us a good answer, and we'll do that after each speaker. Okay.
Okay, one last thing. I've got a couple last things. This is our Transpac menu. We do this ahead of time. It's easy to do. Not a big deal. We're just, this is part of organization, and that's what I like. Now, one of the last things I want to mention is safety. We look at safety on board Pyewacket extremely seriously. We make sure that we have all the safety equipment. We make sure that we have a meeting before we leave the dock the day of the race or on the way out to the race. We make sure that everybody tries on their harnesses so you don't have to do it in the middle of the night rounding West End. We make sure they have their AIS beacon, their things that go in the foul weather gear. So if they fall overboard, we can track them. And Mark Callahan, the captain of Pyewacket, goes over every safety item, points to it, shows us all how it works. And we really do. We really take it seriously. And I would hope and encourage everybody to do that, and that every crew on a race knows what the MOM is, how it's deployed, things like that, as well as man overboard drills. We always send a person over. Some of the rules say, oh no, you can just throw a life jacket over and go and retrieve it. We approach it much differently. We put a person in. In the Pacific Cup, it was Roy Disney in San Francisco Bay in a dry suit. He loved it. He jumped over. We did the whole, circle around. We picked him up, and it was great. And I would encourage everybody to do that, and bring them aboard with the life sling, just the whole thing. It's much more realistic. And I think that's it from me. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And the most important thing on a Transpac is that you go and you have fun, because you're about to go on a race 8 months from now, and it finishes in paradise. There's not a race that I've ever been on that's as good as Transpac, and you'll just have the time of your life. And hopefully the things that are going to be discussed tonight are going to get you there safely and in a little better shape, a little more prepared, and you're going to be able to just love it. Thank you.
Thanks, Robbie.
Thank you, Robbie. It looks like we have several questions. Bill, take it away.
Yeah, for some reason, a lot of people are identified as Jared. So if you're not Jared and you're submitting a question, you might just add your name. But we have 6 people who all essentially ask the same thing, which is whether or not you'd share your checklist and your watch schedule.
I knew that would be coming up. And you know, I actually sent this outline to Roy and said, what do you think of this? Is it okay if I share this stuff? And he said, absolutely. So I'll probably be asking Roy that same question, and I'd be happy to send it to you guys if you want. It's a, you know, the checklist, I've shown it to Volvo sailors and they were impressed at how detailed it was. And it just basically, you just, you know, go through it, and I have a yes column and a no column and comments, and you just check off whether you've done it or not, whether it's still to be done. But I'll tell you, you leave the dock and you're a lot better off having that.
Well, once you get an answer to that question, if Robbie is able to share it, we'll make arrangements to post it up on the website so people can take a look at it.
Okay.
Let's see here. The other question that came up, which is maybe a good segue for Jib, is a question in the course of your presentation, Jib, the question was, what percentage of the fleet uses Expedition? And I know you're going to be talking about navigation electronics. So maybe we'll just turn it over to you and let you work that into your presentation.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you, Randy, for having me. And
Hey, not so fast.
oh, not so fast.
I gotta, you know, talk you up a little bit first. So I won't brag too much. So yeah, just a little bit about Jib. You know, you can read his profile and the, you know, announcement and what boats he sailed on. But I've known Jib for many years. We've raced a ton together, you know, inshore, offshore, lots of miles, and you will not find a nicer, more honest guy when it comes to you know, putting the guts together on a, you know, electronics and all that stuff. And he's certainly solved a lot of problems over the years on boats that I have raced on. So all good. Take it away, Jib.
Wow, that'll do it for me. Thanks a lot for having me tonight. Good night. No, it's a pleasure to be here, guys. You know, it all really starts in my world with the basics of the boat. You know, I sent out this breakdown of what we need on the boat, what Transpac requires on the boat. Robbie was talking about checklists a little bit ago, and you really need that same checklist for the gear on the boat, navigation gear, you know, parallels, dividers, all that kind of stuff. Paper charts are required, you know, and so it's really important to go through the SIs, go through the NORs. And for me, I've made a checklist, an SI checklist of everything that Transpac requires me to do. The first thing on the checklist, of course, is to have your flag on your backstay when you leave the dock, right? I mean, that's pretty simple, but how many people might forget that? Make that list. You know, the fun one is you start the race and you have to have an email sent to the race committee before the west end of Catalina. And you know, the classic situation is Carrie Deaver hits the button as I don't think her stern has crossed the starting line, and her email is the first one in. So I mean, it's like she gets it done off her plate, and it's awesome. So it's like, I've heard this from the race committee, by the way. Who was the first one in? Oh, it's Carrie. Every time it's Carrie. It's awesome. So anyway, it's important to have that SI checklist. Make sure that you have it all. And throughout the race, I'll go through morning roll calls and things like that, and I'll check the box that says, yeah, I did it this morning. You know, and every now and then I'll wake up and go, holy crap, I've got 20 minutes to get this done. And so it's really important to check the boxes, like Robbie was saying on that. So back to basics. I mean, you start off, you jump on a boat, and maybe it's got one compass, two compasses, who knows? But gosh, get the compass adjuster to come out and swing the compass. You know, it's a couple $100, and that's your go-to when all the other stuff goes straight to hell. All your marine electronics, you know, it's all based on electrons, and when the batteries are dead, there are no more electrons. So let's get the basics done. Compass adjusted, maybe the boat speed. You know, understand PVMDC, that's true variation magnetic deviation and compass. Understand the difference between deviation and variation and what that does to your compass headings and so on. They'll give you a deviation card when it's all done, and you'll be able to tell how close it is. One of the fun things this last PV race was Eric Champagne was driving, and he looked at me one day and he said, Jim, you know, your wet compass is off by like 20 degrees from your magnetic, from your electronic B&G compass. And I remembered that they had, we bought these coffee cups with little carabiners on them, and they had little magnets in them. And well, I picked up I didn't say anything, I just picked up the coffee cup, and the wet compass went right back to where it was supposed to be. And Eric just started smiling, and he was like, wow, that was good. So think about the things that are around your compass when you're sailing. You know, so anyway, moving on, I don't want to bore you with the details of compasses, but it's really important to understand that this is the core instrument that'll save your ass when you lose everything else. Knot meters, you know, spend a lot of good time calibrating. You know, you're sailing 2,300 miles, and if your knot meter's off by even 1 or 2%, it's gonna play a role in your routing and stuff. Depth sounders are in the SIs. You have to have them. They have to be, I think it's 200 feet, it says in there, but read up on it. You know, back to the batteries going dead, all this stuff is going to save you. So moving past all that, we go down to electronics, and nowadays more and more electronics are part of the NEMA 2000 backbone, and that's all great. When you install the NEMA 2000 backbone, you install all these instruments. It's all really good, but if you're just plugging a bunch of stuff in, you know, how healthy is that backbone? How healthy is it really? And I'm not going to go into the details of how to know if it's healthy, but look into it. Understand where the backbone runs, because every so often you'll have a device that takes a crap, and you're going to have to go unplug that device, and you're going to have to know where to go to unplug that device. You're going to need to know where, you know, in some instances you have to unplug everything because you don't know what's caused that problem. So it's really important to know how that NEMA 2000 backbone runs through the boat, what's plugged in, how many devices do you have. You know, and one of the other things, everything runs on the NEMA 2000 backbone is it's all being fed power to all the devices with the exception of the chart plotter. So how many devices are actually using power on that backbone? And when your batteries in the middle of the ocean get down to 11 volts or something like that, what do you think the voltage on the backbone is? I mean, it's going to be down at like 10 volts, right? So understand, check the health of your NEMA 2000 backbone, understand what's plugged into it so that you can really troubleshoot quickly and make it work out. You know, one of the things I'll add to that, I was sailing with the destroyer the last Transpac, and I think it was on the way to the West End, or actually it wasn't Transpac, it was another race. But the bottom line is there was a portable inverter that was in the nav station, and every now and then all the instruments just freeze up. You know, what is going on here? And so finally I moved inverter out. It was a little portable plug-in cigarette lighter type. I moved it out of the way, problem solved. So I'm now no inverters on the boat. You will not find one on my boat. So you know, that's one problem. I don't want to have to worry about any of that. So moving on to chart plotters, you know, Robbie hit the safety issues on that. It's so important. Understand what the MOB's button's going to do. Chart plotters or on the laptop, you know, understand everybody needs to know how to hit the button. Most racer boats today have buttons in the cockpit where you can simply hit the button that's right next to the helm station. So you hit that button. Now, what does that do? You know, where does it display? How do you know? You need to know where you're going to find the information to go get your buddy back. You know, so figure all this stuff out well in advance. Are you getting AIS data overlaid on the screen? That's important. As Robbie said earlier, that you lose the guy in, he's got his AIS on, you know, are you getting data? Are you, you know, is it coming in on the chart plotter as well? Is it coming in on the laptop? Understand where that stuff's coming from. It just makes it easier. Moving down to computers, you know, the question was asked earlier, how many boats are running Expedition? Well, I would hope it's 100% of the boats running Expedition. It's such a powerful tool. You know, that Eisler has done such a fabulous job of putting it together, and it's just, you know, I've been sailing since before Expedition was out. It used to be called SailComp. And that was a great tool back then because Expedition wasn't even on the market yet, but Expedition picked up the ball and, you know, fantastic tool. Get to know it, understand how to use it. And the more you learn about it, the better the navigating you'll do. We were talking about computers, and I think Randy asked one of the big questions was data. You know, how do you know how much data you're going to use for a Transpac, for example? It's kind of a hard question to answer. There's one software called GlassWire, GLASS Wire, WIRE. It's a software you download on the computer, and it'll keep track of all the data coming in and out of the Ethernet port. So that's a great tool to have. Download it to your laptop. And then if you're going to go to websites and download stuff, there's another tool I learned about. It's called tools.pingdom.com, and that's, I can give it to Randy later, but basically it's a website that you can take any URL, for example, google.com, type it into tools.pingdom.com, and it'll tell you how big that website is, how big that page is you're downloading. And it's shocking, really, to see, you know, for example, Google. I mean, it's a lot of data. So one of the other things on that would be take your computer home, plug it into your internet at home, run the GlassWire, and then start doing the routing that you want to do. Run the weather, you know, as often as you want to run it, and any other websites, and some you know, you can run some yellow brick from other regattas around the world and see what it's going to take to download all that stuff. That'll give you a really good understanding of how much data that you're going to need. You know, if you make the list and go through the deal, you'll be amazed at how it'll be a great tool. You know, just download it and understand it. Again, Expedition, there's man overboard features in it where you can plug into a COM port, and it'll pop up all over Expedition. What's nice about the new H5000 BNG instruments, when you hit the man overboard button, it comes up on all screens. It gives you range and bearing on all screens. And we tested this out, I think before the Good Energy last year. It was a lot of fun. We went sailing, and man, somebody had a white hat on, and it flew off their head into the water. And somebody said, well, that's all right, we just hit the man overboard button. And so we did, and we went sailing for like an hour and a half and came back and said, okay, where's the hat? You know, and we went back to the man overboard feature, and you wouldn't believe it. It was actually 2 feet underwater, but we found that hat. It was pretty shocking. So, so make sure you understand how to hook up those features and understand how to use them. It's really, really important. So moving on to airmail. So, you know, the laptop, make sure the laptop is a good laptop. It's not an old rusty laptop. The COM ports all have connections, and they, you know, the salt air isn't good. So try to get a fresh laptop plugged in, and you know, don't use let's say 5-year-old or 6-year-old computer that's been on the boat for a long time. Let's get a fresh laptop, and frankly, let's make sure it's the boat's laptop, not like somebody else's laptop. You know, we were working on a couple laptops, and it's dedicated to the boat, basically. That way, all the IP settings are all, you know, static to what you're using and what you're doing. So the next one is, I was at a seminar with Artie Means, and you know, he one of his biggest pushes is keep it simple, stupid. You know, he's an advocate for sail mail. I love sail mail. You can do it other ways if you want to. It just gets complicated, and you know, when it's shitty out and things go to hell, you know, the simpler you've made your system, the easier it'll be to repair the system. So keep it simple, really important. Airmail and sail mail, there's a number of ways to get to airmail and sail mail. You know, are you using a Iridium phone? So you're going to be connected with the USB port. Are you going to be using the Iridium Go? That'll be through the Wi-Fi. And if you're lucky enough to get some kind of a Fleet One or Fleet Broadband, that'll be an IP address that you'll be using the Ethernet port on the computer to tie into. Something fun I heard about today from Eric up at Fairlawn is there's a It's not out yet, but keep your eyes out for it. It's an Iridium Go Pro, which is going to allow us internet access using the same Iridium Go antenna or Iridium 9575 antenna that you would have on the stern for your Iridium phone. So it's not out yet. Maybe in the next 60 days, I understand. It'll just be a nice additional tool that gives you a second way of getting to the internet without a fleet broadband or fleet one and so on. So speaking of fleet one and fleet broadband, I'm not clear on why the cost is so high, but the fleet one is a very inexpensive unit at like $3,000 or something like that. The fleet broadband is like an $8,000 or $9,000 device. But if you want to buy a package of data to go to Hawaii on the fleet one, it's going to cost you $8,000. So you've got $9,000, $10,000, $11,000 into a system where the fleet broadband is going to give you a gig of data for like $1,800. So if you're going to do more than one Transpac, I would recommend going with the fleet broadband, not the fleet one. If you're not doing Transpacs, the fleet one is great. The coastal data is much cheaper, but the fleet broadband setup is much cheaper data, and the second Transpac will pay for itself in a heartbeat. So moving down, are we running a tablet on deck? You know, are you bringing an iPad or some kind of a tablet? Make sure you understand. Do you have a router on the boat? You're going to need a router. I think PepWave is a nice router. I enjoy that. Peter Eisler showed me that, and we plug it in, and it's awesome. It's a great tool. Understand how to get to the Wi-Fi. Understand how to change it. Understand how to keep the crew off of it, because once you're logged in on a fleet broadband or fleet one for that matter, that Wi-Fi will have direct access to the internet, and you can find you know, the guys be in their bunks quietly checking their emails and stuff like that. It's like, no, that's just too much money. So make sure that they don't have access to it, you know, to get into it. So we'll do the Wi-Fi. Where's the access point? How do you gain access to it? Change the password if you have to, whatever you need to do. Understand what device manager is about. You know, you get in there and you've got a problem. The first thing I do is dive into device manager. For example, with the Iridium phone 9575. If I lose connection, I go right to the device manager. I look for the Iridium phone popping up in the device manager. If it's there, that's great. It means that the connection to the phone, to the laptop is still intact. So then I'll have to work the software out from there. Keep a copy of the SailMail primer on board, a paper copy in front of you, because if you there's a lot to do, and having it in your hands is much better than trying to look at it on a laptop when you're banging around in the seat. But understand it. Matter of fact, I even keep device manager on my desktop so I can quickly get to it if I have an issue. Another software I really like a lot is called IP Scan. It's called Advanced IP Scanner. Sometimes you get lost in your own system, that the network, you're tired, whatever, and your fleet broadband isn't showing up, or you're missing something. Maybe the PepWave isn't showing up. You can do a scan with this advanced IP scanner, and it will tell you everything that's on your network, your local network, and it'll remind you that, oh, that's right, that the BNG H5000 is 192.0.2, not 0.10, which I thought it was. It quickly gets you back in the game when you lose some of your equipment. I like to map it out, even if it's just a quick, stupid drawing, because you know, people, it's the crew. Who knows who's sitting at the nav station while I'm taking a nap, and things get changed, you know. So understand how to get it all back quickly. And by the way, keep all the drivers for all your equipment on a thumb drive. I like to do that. If you have to load something, you don't necessarily have the internet capability to do it. So keep it on a thumb drive and keep it handy. So moving down, you know, we talked about basics. This kind of goes backwards a little bit, but you know, your VHF radio, there's a lot of boats out there that have a terrible VHF radio connection. And this is something that's so simple. You can call any electronics shop. They'll bring a watt meter down. They'll plug into your radio. Make sure it's putting out 25 watts, thereabouts. You know, you don't want to leave home with a radio that's not putting out at all. And sometimes you just don't know. It might be putting out 10 watts, but that's not good enough, you know? So put the watt meter on it, put a dummy load on the radio, see what the radio's doing. I've seen a lot of instances where the radio's just not putting out, never mind the coax connection up to the top. Get someone down there that knows how to use a watt meter with a dummy load. And then if you have an AIS tied into that same antenna, let's plug in with the AIS splitter tied into that VHF coax and see if the output of the watt meter is the same. I mean, it should be. And I've had several instances where the splitter has gone south, and I've replaced the splitter. And as a matter of fact, on Good Energy, the splitter that was on board was a B&G Nails 400, I think it was, and it had a problem. We replaced it, and the problem was solved. So get someone to look at that stuff. In the Transpac rules, it talks about dB at the top of the mast. Make sure that the coax is big enough for the rule, right? I think it's 1 dB, but I would say go look at the rules and you'll do the math to figure out how big the cable has to be, considering the run to the top of, like, for example, Good Energy's run is 135. The rig's 100 feet tall, and it's 30 feet to the back of the boat. So it's a 135-foot run. You can do the math quickly to find out what is at the top of the antenna and make sure the coax is big enough. You don't want to chintz on this. This is very important. On the VHF, we're also going to make sure that the MMSI number is programmed in. You know, if you hit that button and it's not programmed in, that little button is not going to do you any good. It's not going to squeal at all. So make sure the MMSI number's in, and that the information that's in the radios in the MMSI number is for your current owner and current crew. Boats get sold all the time, and you know, you don't want to call somebody who doesn't own the boat anymore and say, hey, we've got a problem. So just make sure that all that stuff's up to date, including the EPIRBs. I think Randy's going to talk something about that too, but make sure all the information is current. Make sure your AIS is transmitting and receiving. You know, there's something that the AIS is such a powerful tool to me. It's, you know, love having radar. I was trained to use radar. But I'll tell you what, the AIS pops up and it's solid. You look at it. I know it's not, you know, some boats don't have it. I understand that, but more and more, everybody's getting it, and all commercial vessels have to have it. And it's a great tool for using it when you're dodging ship traffic. I think we did a race on OEX years ago, a Mexican race, and I actually extended the sword, if you will. We had a ship coming down. He was about 7 hours back, and I extended the sword out 7 hours, and sure enough, we were going to have a collision in 7 hours. So I jumped up on deck and informed the crew that in 7 hours we're going to crash into a ship. And you know, that was, you know, some smiled and some didn't, but sure enough, I kept watching those swords touch for the next 4 or 5 hours, and along the way, 2 hours into it, you know, we're down to 1 hour, and I called the ship and I said, listen, we've been tracking you for 7 hours now, and it looks like, is there any chance that you would possibly, you know, if you could just alter course 1 or 2 degrees? And the captain came back and said, oh, Captain, no, I can't do that. I'm constrained by my draft, right? And I'm like, all right, fair enough. So, you know, we're in the middle of the ocean. There's plenty of water. He's not constrained by his draft, but he wasn't really interested in altering course for a guy on a sailboat racing. And so he got about 30 minutes away, and I called him back again. I said, Captain, we'd like to cross your bow. If you don't mind, we'd like to cross your bow. We think, you know, we're comfortable, we're far enough away, and all this good stuff. And that's when the captain came back and said, oh, OEX, I'll take your stern. So that was great. He took my stern. Well, the boat behind us, which I think at the time was Halua, they didn't like that very much because they were like a half mile or a quarter mile behind us, and this ship was going to split the two of us in half. But it all worked out well. We're here to talk about it, so that was fun. But the AIS is, you know, understand how to use it. There's a feature in Expedition that allows you to track via the AIS units. Peter Iser told me once how to do it. I still don't know how to do it. I'll learn again. I got to watch the movies again, but follow up and look at some of Peter's stuff. It's pretty fascinating. He did it on Destroyer for us, and it was pretty interesting to watch. You could see all the trends just like anything else. But oh, 2 minutes left. All right, well, that's good because I've only got a couple things here. So look into trackers. Trackers are pretty simple devices. One that stands out is the Bivy because of the price tag. I think it's $250, and it's got a lot of data. Other ones are Global Star. The Garmin makes a nice one. Pick something that you like. They're all kind of about the same. Iridium Hotspot's a tool I'd keep on board because it's a quick way to run sail mail and all that stuff. Iridium 95, I like that a lot. I've told you about that. And then the data rates, again, just you have to sort of. Oh, one thing I'd like to really make clear is if you're using a Fleet broadband or a Fleet FB250 or something like that, one of the things that'll wake you up in the middle of the night is, did I stop the session? You'll go in, you'll log in, you'll start the session on the web portal, and life is good. You're running your weather, you're running your routing and all the good stuff. And then you say, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to go take a nap for an hour. You wake up about half an hour into it. Oh my God, my session is still running. So remember to start the session, but please, please, please remember to stop the session and keep hitting the refresh button until you see it says start session, which means you have already stopped the session. So pay attention to that. Otherwise, your owner is going to be having a terrible time with the bill. And that's that. But set the data usage. Oh, I like to get, the last thing is, I really like to get emails from, we use Linkwave. There's a lot of people can provide, but set data usage emails for whatever makes you comfortable. That way you know where you're at in the world of your time. You'll get an email in and it'll say you've used up 50 megabytes or something like that. You can set it for whatever parameters you want. But, the last thing, if you're going to buy time for the Fleet broadbands, make sure that you buy the time on the first of the month. They bill from the first of the month to the end of the month. And so in other words, you can't just buy the time on the 15th and it runs out on the 15th. They will prorate it. So if you want all the time you've bought, buy it on the first of the month. You can always run into the next month with the second round of it, but pay attention to what they're trying to sell you. So I think that's it, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jib. Bill, any good questions?
Yeah, we had one question from Aaron Williams, who's asking if you could provide the URLs. If I recall correctly, Peter that might be part of what he does as well. So Aaron, you might want to check in with Peter Eisler's seminar in February, and I think he'll provide them. But Jib, do you have anything that you could offer?
The URLs for the Glasswire, I think you just Google Glasswire and it'll come up. The other one, I have the which one else? Let me look through my list here.
I think when Peter, there's a bunch of URLs for weather and different things that I know.
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, Peter Eisler's the bomb when it comes to all that. So I would wait for his seminar to he's got tons of information. So.
Okay. And then I was wondering if this was going to come up, and I just got two questions, whether or not anyone's planning on using Starlink. So there's a whole topic. Yeah.
So I that's the last thing on my page is Starlink. And as I understand it right now, there's nobody has sailed across an ocean and run Starlink the whole time. We're not sure if there's actually an availability out there. I would stand by a little bit longer. I know that the ships have some very expensive, like $10,000 and $20,000 Starlink setups out there that they're using, but this is directly from Eric at Fairlawn. It's not there for the marine market yet. I'm sure they're working on it, but I really don't have a lot to report. There's just nothing out there yet. For the coastal cruisers, fantastic. Guys going to Catalina, up and down the coast, fantastic. But out in the middle, about 500 to 1,500 miles offshore, no, I don't think it's going to work yet. I could be wrong. I just don't know.
Then we got a question that's sort of unrelated to this, and maybe I'll just open it up. There's a question about the fact that most boats today are designed with spade rudders, and what our thoughts might be about taking a boat on Transpac that has a keel rudder. And I would just say that the old saying that the best boat to take to Hawaii is the one you own, number one. And number two, we have an Aloha class for boats that aren't the most current designs. And so with the proper rating, you can compete in that class with whatever boat you have. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I talked to anybody that went on Chubasco a couple years ago. They all say that you better have a lot of really strong people because you'll be getting a workout driving.
All right. And then there was one question that was asking the name of the access point that you like to use, Jib.
That's the PepWave.
PepWave.
PepWave makes it. It's a fantastic tool. It allows you to run the fleet broadband through it. It's look into it. It's a nice tool.
And then Alan just weighed in on the chat, reminding me that Dorade won Transpac a few years ago with the keel hung rudder, and won the barn door. So there's something to aspire to. And that's all the questions we have on that.
Thanks a lot, Jib. Great talk, great info. And yeah, Jib is over in San Pedro at his store. So check in with him over there if you need to.
Hey, Randy, there's one other question that just came in.
Yeah.
It's more of maybe a suggestion for a future seminar is this person's anonymously has sailed the race several times, but it'll be the first time they're bringing a boat back. And maybe could we include some discussion of the return trip prep and execution and that sort of thing for the Transpac?
Transpac,
good input. Okay, next up, now this guy, we got to lower the average age somehow. So that's why we called Brian. I think I've only known Brian about maybe 10 or maybe 15 years. I think I met you when we were match racing in Solings up in Cabrillo Beach, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
But yeah, but I think I beat you. So you know what? It might have been the last time. But anyways, Brian is a very accomplished offshore, inshore sailor. If you look at the boats he's sailed on, he's pretty much starting at the top and working his way up, I guess. But anyways, West Coast manager now of North.
Yep.
So he's got a lot to handle, but he's going to talk to us about what sales we need to have. Take it away.
Well, the other thing, Randy does PRO for Congressional Cup, and there's something very mean about doing a pre-start and seeing him cook a tri-tip off the back and having to smell that as you're doing circles. I'm actually, so sales required. I guess we'll start there. Storm sails are something you need. You need to have a storm tri and storm jib. If they're new or built recently, the rules have changed. They have to be orange, which is something different. They used to be white or BLF stripe, and now they want them to be all a bright color. There's also restraints on not just the size, but type of material they can be. So usually it's Dacron or a Dyneema type of material. No Kevlar, no carbons allowed to be in there. With your storm jib and trysail, it's really important to test fit them before you start. Even at the dock, light or day, hoist them up, do it with the crew, look at where they sheet. Usually, sometimes on boats, we will take a Sharpie and write on the clue where it sheets to. So that way, when you pull it out in the really bad condition, you know exactly what pad eye it goes to and don't even have to think about it. You have to have a heavy weather jib, which a lot of times is a J4. You can, actually I have a note on the trysail, you can skip having a trysail if you have a mainsail that reefs to 50%, which a lot of people don't have. But think about 50% is roughly at about third reef height. Choosing your race inventory. This is where it starts to get a little trickier. I've been lucky enough to sail the last 2 years with Peter Eisler and other really good navigators. And what they'll do is they start looking at the weather, depending on the race. It could be weeks in front of time, and they're starting to just look for patterns. Well, I usually ask to start getting the routing from them early on so I can start looking at the patterns of what sails it's requiring and looking for. But you got to have the sales already. So what should you have in your inventory? A lot of people, you need to have a Transpac's a running race. Everybody thinks about the fantastic pictures of going downwind, but like Robbie mentioned, first couple days, it's reaching. You are going to be on the wind to Catalina usually, and then it's the power reach. So what kind of sails do you use in reach? It depends on your boat. Is it going to be just your Genoa? Do you have a jib top or a code 0? It really kind of depends on speed of your boat, what kind of wind angles you like to sail with it. And talking to your sailmaker about how you sail the boat really helps drive the decision on what you should get. Faster boats are going to have flatter, more jib-like shapes, and slower boats where the apparent wind's further aft, even when reaching, they're going to have fuller sails. Then after you do your reaching for a little while, you go into the running. So whether it's symmetricals or asymmetricals, you're going to, like Robbie said, that sail is going to be up for 75% of the race, maybe a little bit longer. Good to have a backup, or one that you feel comfortable if you happen to blow it up, you want to put up. You don't want to be halfway across and not have a good runner to get you all the way there. And then once you get to, say, 3/4 of the way across, you start getting a little bit more of the tropical type of weather where you can maybe see squalls start to pop up. Well, you probably want to have a heavy weather running sail ready to go, where you might be peeling from your 2A to your 4A and back and forth. Other good sails to think about to have that are kind of like Robbie was talking about, free unrated speed, are stay sails. There's been a huge, the last easy 5 years, probably longer, development on stay sails. Everybody, the old saying used to be, you're either going to go half knot slower, half knot faster with a stay sail, or some guys would call them a handbrake. Not anymore. Totally different. And that's also been driven by everybody sailing offshore a little bit differently. No longer just the square it back and sail DDW. Even with a symmetrical, we've learned, okay, you're going to sail a little bit hotter, maybe 160, 165 true wind angle. It allows you to put a spinnaker stay sail in there. And what the spinnaker stay sail does is it helps accelerate the wind on the backside of the main. So it turns the main back into, just instead of just being a catching sail, it turns it back into a little bit more of a foil sail. Bigger boats, you'll also see them have Genoa stay sails, and you'll use that inside, maybe on the day 2 after you're on Catalina, inside your code 0 or jib top, put up a Genoa stay sail. Then usually progression would be from your tight reaching sails, you'll go into something like an A3, which is probably your first nylon type of spinnaker you put up, you know, your flat, twisty type of spinnaker. So you're little reaching, still reaching, you know, probably 120s, 130 true wind angle before you get into your full running. So a good A3 can be quite powerful and versatile for another reason. The A3 on some boats can become your heavy weather sail, depending on what style boat you have. Because it's smaller, twistier, it might make it easier to steer through some of the waves. But again, talk to your sailmaker and maybe have your sail crossover chart. And if you don't have a sail crossover chart, start taking notes. You should, every time you go out sailing, have a little notebook, write down when you use a sail. It doesn't matter if it's upwind or downwind. What was the wind speed? What wind angle did you use it in? When you did a change, you feel like it went better or worse, make those notes. In Expedition, you can do what's called events. So when you're running a strip chart, navigator can go in and click event, and they can say what sail change you did. So you can actually go in and then look at the data later to see, okay, compared to target, were we going faster or slower when we made the change? And we do this all the time. Peter will upload the data. After every race, I go through and look at it, and we'll make small little tweaks on our sail chart, which could be moving a sail 1 or 2 degrees on the chart, but you're just always kind of doing that refining. Because you might learn something out there. You're always trying something new. Just look for faster combinations all the time. Don't be afraid to when you're building your chart, don't be afraid to try new things. Maybe push the sail out of range just for a little bit and just test it. Because going into the 2 weeks before Transpac, when your navigator's really running your routes, you want to look at that chart and see, oh, are we using are we going to need to bring the J2 or do we only need the J1? And maybe you can pull a head sail off, or same thing with the spinnakers. Are we going to use it? Does it look like it's forecast to be used? And then maybe you can pull a sail off the boat and make the boat a little bit lighter, have some more space down below. What else is here? But basically, the sail chart is a big deal. Like we reference it all the time. Have a printed out copy, put it on deck. That same chart gets loaded into Expedition, and it just really helps keep everybody on the same page. Because even up on deck, they can pull it out. If the wind starts shifting, they can see what's the next sail. Always thinking about what your next sail is you go to. The sail for some of the code sails, I'll touch on those for a minute. ORR a few years ago introduced the thing into the rule called large roach head sails. Everybody's saying, what is that? Well, code zeros need to be a 75% of the foot length to count as a spinnaker, but that's not the most efficient shape. So sail makers and competitors wanted to go to, let's say, a 65% mid girth, because then the sail didn't get the flappy leech that we all have seen on code zeros. And ORR and other rules have opened up to start figuring out how to rate them. Basically, the large roach hood sail is a sail that's a mid girth in between a spinnaker and a jib. So in between 75% of the foot and 50% of the foot length. So it's also called a tweener because it's in between those two sails. Which type of sail you should get really is defined by what you already have in your inventory. Whenever I talk to a client about new sails, I like to find out where they expect it to work, what they already have on their inventory, and then if you have a sail chart, basically draw where you think it should be. And there's been times I will tell a client, well, you already have a sail that does the exact same thing you want to do, and so they don't buy the sail because you just don't need it. On board, sail repair kit. These are key. You're going to want to put it in either a dry bag or some kind of pelican case. And you want to have sticky back Dacron in there, insignia cloth. I usually like to have Kevlar, sticky back Kevlar, which is like the spreader patch material. Hand sewing palm, needle, thread. That stuff also works in case you need to repair rigging. 1-inch double-sided seam stick tape. That's great for holding down that material while you sew it. If you have like a 3DI type sail, we have repair cloth. Probably want some of that on board. If you have laminate sails, you probably want some kind of a sticky back scrim type material to be able to fix those. For the sail cloth, you probably want to have either, there's a product called Dr. Sails, which is a 2-part glue that stays flexible, or in the really bad cases, 5200 works really well. Again, it also works in your boat building kit that you should have on board. And no, it's really messy. So if you start digging into those glues, have gloves in that sail repair kit, scrapers, squeegees, so that you can do the repair down below. Have a good pair of scissors. Check the scissors if you have an existing sail repair kit, because they do get rusty quickly. Some webbing, some Dyneema webbing, because it not only works to maybe if you have a clue ring fail, you can hand sew a piece of webbing back on, but you can also create using Dyneema webbing like a loop if you need to put a block back onto the deck or something like that. It works really well. I like to have a couple of sailmaker awls, or called picks, because if you need to hand sew something, it's nice to be able to drive the hole to be able to pass the needle through real easy. And then seam rippers. A couple of seam rippers are always handy. We had a good example. We had on Transpac last time. We had the stitching failed on one of our tack rings on a Genoa staysail, and I was down below with the drill because it's big boat on being the Volvo drill, hand sewing palm, and 2 of us were basically hand sewing the ring back on. And 30 minutes, we had the sail back up in the air. And that's the other key thing. Don't, just because the sail fails, check and see if you can fix it. Don't give up. Always try to fix it, get it back up, because you're probably going to be better with that sail back in the air. That's about all I really have for now.
Awesome, Brian. Thank you. And it looks like we have a couple questions for you, Mr. Bill.
Yeah, the couple questions about posting the sail repair kit. We distributed a program before the call here, and that's the items on the list are on that if you have it. Randy, did this go out to everybody?
It was supposed to, unless you signed up right at the last minute, and then maybe you signed up after that email went out.
Okay, we'll figure out a way to get that on the, maybe we'll put something on the website for the content of the seminars so people can access that. And then I just wanted to mention, unrelated to Brian's comments, I got a couple questions about if people are interested in crewing on boats, and I just want to let everybody know that they're on the website. There's a countdown clock to the first start. Directly below that, there's a menu option for crew classified. And last time I looked at it, there were 15 or 20 or more people who posted their background, and I just got one while we were on the call here. So if you're interested in getting on a boat, that's one way to get your name out there. And obviously networking is going to be the other. And that's all I have on this.
Great. Well, we're doing really well on time. It's 7:21, and I saved the most boring, unexciting topic for the end. But there are a group of people on this call that safety at sea and harnesses and that kind of stuff that was actually very exciting for. So, anyways. To start off on my topic, if you're serious about racing offshore, even just coastal stuff, you absolutely need to do the safety at sea 2-day, training. The Transpac requires that 30% of the crew complete the training. That's actually in the U.S. sailing offshore regulations. So it has to be 30% of the crew, including the person in charge or the skipper. I think everybody on the boat should have it. And in the case when your boat is sinking, as I got to experience, it absolutely, we were all very calm. And the training that we did in safety at sea absolutely made a big difference. So I think there's one coming up in February at Long Beach Yacht Club. Basically, they have to have it anywhere where there is a pool. And I'll give you one piece of advice about safety at sea. If you want to get really scared in a safe environment, when you go in the pool for safety at sea in all your foul weather gear, make sure you wear your boots and watch what happens when your boots fill up with water and you have to climb up the webbing ladder into the life raft. It'll really open your eyes. So I'll be taking my boots off every time in the future, when I get into the water. So absolutely do safety at sea. So the other thing, I got into all the medical kits and safety at sea stuff a long time ago before it was cool. I was more of a nerd because I wanted to talk about all of it. I wanted to make sure the crew knew all about it. And 25 or 30 years ago, if you wore a life jacket or a harness or whatever, that wasn't really cool. The times have changed now, and it's it's a big business, and we're all very much into it. The internet, has allowed us to really learn a lot about it. But I think as Robbie said earlier, they spend a lot of time on PyWacket going over all this stuff, and I could not agree more with Robbie. And you need to know where everything is. You need to spend, a half a day, come down on a sailing day, a practice day, and get down there at 9 and have the whole crew spend a couple hours and just, go through the whole boat and go through every piece of safety gear. And I'll talk in a minute about being the person, being the leader of that, and how that can get you, if you've never done Transpac, you need to have skills. You need to be a good sailor, but you also need to have some additional skills. And that's what makes you a desired crew member, because you don't just know how to drive and trim or do the bow. You can fix an engine, you can fix the water maker, you know how all the safety gear works. So it's an additional skill. But so have one crew member, or you be that crew member that hammers on the crew, hammers on the owner. I mean, I go on so many boats, and I ask the question, well, where's this and where's that? And when was the last time the harnesses were taken apart? And well, I don't know. So I've seen so many sailors, they'll go buy a brand new spin lock harness, they'll pull it out of the bag, and they'll hang it up in the bow of the boat. And then okay, I'm going to go put it on. Do you even know how it works? Do you even know how to take it apart and put it back together? How does the quick release tether work if you have one of those? How does the AIS beacon deploy if you have an auto deploy AIS? So you should learn how to do all that. And again, Robbie said, don't wait until 8 o'clock on Saturday night of Transpac when it's blowing 25 off the west end, and you're putting your harness on the first time, and it doesn't fit or something. So work on that. Near and dear to my heart, building the ditch bags. And if you have 2 rafts, 2 ditch bags, you should have one for each raft. There's different, the SCR rules describe what should be in it, but a radio, an EPIRB, a first aid kit, maybe a couple extra pair of reading glasses, basic contents. Has the EPIRB been registered? Has it been tested? How many do you have? Most boats have one, and some secondary ones. So who, like Robbie said, or Jib, who's going to get the phone? And an interesting story. When we got picked up by PyWacket when we sank, we had, the Coast Guard must have thought we were having some kind of party going on, because I think we had 5 EPIRBs and 3 PLBs and God knows what else. But they kept telling us, make sure you recover all of them, turn them all off, don't leave them out there, because they'll just become a hazard to navigation. So that is interesting. But make sure you know how all those things work. The other thing that everybody goes and buys these AIS transmitters to keep on your harness or whatever. Have you ever practiced with it? And for me, if I was in the water and I knew that everybody on the crew had looked at the chart plotter before, and they knew what a man overboard AIS beacon looked like, and I'd seen them looking at the chart plotter when we were practicing, I would feel a lot better when I was in the water. So I like just taking all the harnesses up to the parking lot, turn the beacons on, have somebody down on the boat talking on the phone, and test them one by one and see if there's an ID number, or see what pops up on the chart plotter. That's just, we practice so much on maneuvers and sail changes, but we don't practice as much as we should with safety gear. So what else? personally for me on my, I have a spin lock and I have a little pouch thing on the side of it. So I keep a knife in there, a personal EPIRB, and a little one of the little glow stick things. So, I think, just think about if you want to have some extra gear on your own harness, if you sail with your own, or if the boat has all the harnesses, talk together about, with the crew and the owner, what you think is appropriate to have on those. And, the other thing on OEX, now rock and roll, we have a couple of real important safety policies. No peeing off the back of the boat at night, unless it's drifter. But we just don't want people doing that, come up on deck and going straight to the back of the boat and, slip or have something bad happen. So just, have a real clear policy amongst the crew on all your safety when are you going to wear harnesses, and agree to what the rules are and then follow them. I think that's it's a good way to go. The U.S. Sailing website under safety has all kinds of really good studies and videos. There's a great one of Comanche, how they handle a man overboard situation. They sent out a rescue swimmer and they use a halyard, and a really interesting video to watch that. So that's all on the U.S. Sailing website. So next up, another thought on all this stuff. So I know there's a lot of people on this call that you want to do Transpac and you want to get on a boat, and how do you do that? And I think you're going to start out doing some coastal races, or Long Beach Race Week or Cabo or whatever, and you kind of let the owner know and the crew know, I want to do the big offshore races, but you're not quite at that level yet, and there's kind of the group on the boat that always does the offshore races, and you want to try to get into that loop. So if you show up one day and you say to the owner or the guy running the boat, hey, have you ever really gone through all the safety gear? And no, not really, it's been a while. Well, I like to be that person. Would you let me go through the boat and show you, just go through everything? And I'd like to take that responsibility as a crew member. And that's a skill that you can bring to the boat. And when it comes time to decide who's going to be on the crew for Transpac, they're going to remember that. And I've been that person for many years on a lot of different boats, and I've never really had to use any of this stuff. And finally one day I did, and thank God it all worked and it was all fine. And that was a kind of a big moment for me. It's like all these years of studying all this stuff and making sure it was right, it finally paid off. So that was a good thing. So good advice for people trying to get on a boat, learn some skills that nobody else wants to do. Okay, the other thing that happens a lot, there's a big dilemma. Some boats, it's kind of a free-for-all, and every crew brings their own gear, and it's a mishmash. And then other boats, you don't bring anything, and you're given a duffel bag and 0.5 pairs of underwear and 1.5 t-shirts, and this is what you get. So sort all that out, especially when it comes to flashlights and headlamps. And as Robbie said, a bad set of foul weather gear can really ruin your day. I made the mistake once of brand new set of foul weather gear, tried to put it on the first night off Catalina, and the zipper was just a piece of crap. And it was just impossible to try to zip up the zipper on the jacket. And lesson learned, put it on land before you go. So that was a fun one. But just really pay attention to little things like how many headlamps are on the boat, how many flashlights, does each person bring their own? Does the boat have a supply? One of my pet peeves are not anymore, because the boats I sail on, we don't tolerate it. But on some boats, there's always one person when they come down below off watch, they just take their gear off, and it's just spread out everywhere. It's just all over the boat. And then when you go on watch 4 hours later, they're like, oh, has anybody seen my gloves, or anybody seen my, I hate that. So, a place for everything, and everything in its place. And, I can speak to experience on this one. Every time you lay down in your bunk, think about what you're going to do if you wake up to chaos, and is your shit ready to go, and is your harness, just think about when that happens, because, it's probably may not be a boat sinking, but we had one on Medicine Man 1 year off of Cedros Island where it was blowing over 40, and the boom broke. Alan was on the boat with us that one, and that was pretty scary. We were afraid the rig was going to come down, and so that was chaos. So just no matter how well prepared you are, always think about what's going to happen if the really bad thing happens. So that's that. And I just had to throw in a quick story. I put this in my outline. I sailed with Bruce Nelson a fair bit over the years. And he really said this to me once. If you know Bruce, he's got kind of a different sense of humor. But he said, Randy, whenever I get on a new boat, if I'm going to go offshore, I bring a torque wrench with me, and I check all the keel bolts, because, I designed the boat, with 8 keel bolts or 10 keel bolts, and if 2 of them are loose and 8 of them are tight, that means that's a problem. So I always check that. So I thought that was a really interesting idea. So anyways, the other thing, that's pretty critical is the medical kit, first aid kit. And I've been the person that handles that for a lot of years. And what I always do is I build 2 kits, the big nasty one for, big things. And I hide that, and I make sure the crew can't get their hands on it, because they will mess it up, and I don't like that. So that's for the big things. And then I build a day kit, and that's out in the open. That's got your basic Band-Aids and Neosporin and Tylenol and basic stuff that the crew is going to need on a daily basis. And that seems to work out pretty well, and usually gets depleted by the end of the race. As far as the big kit goes, one thing I always do is I have a spreadsheet of all the medicines and narcotics, and I put that on a spreadsheet, and I laminate it, and I have simple notes, how much, what each thing is for, and all that. And the other thing I do is all the meds, usually it's a plastic jar bottle in a box. So I pull out the bottle, get rid of the box, and I write with a Sharpie on the plastic bottle what it is and what it's for. Because when the shit hits the fan and you're looking for something that trying to read writing that's a millimeter high is kind of difficult. So that's a little trick I learned. And then my favorite story, always carry 2 saline IV bags and the proper IV needle, and that's to treat dehydration. And that usually happens as a result of seasickness. And I'm not sure if there's anybody on the call here that was on the boat that year, but we had a crew member very seasick 1 year, and by the 3rd day he was he's a really good sailor from San Pedro, but I'm not going to mention any names, and it's not Jib. But anyways, he was in pretty bad shape. So in my medical training, I learned that if you don't have IV bags, the most porous part of the body is where you would use an enema. So so I came up on deck one day with a big jug of water and the enema kit, and I said, you make the call. You know which one I want to do. It'll be the highlight of my offshore medical career. So he obviously decided to drink the water instead of the alternative. So so have an enema kit too, just for fun. The best source by far to get all the stuff is Seaside Marine Drugs. I put the website in my outline. Joe Siebert is the company owner. I've been working with him for a long time. He works with a lot of race boats, and if basically all you need is the Coast Guard documentation certificate for the vessel, and you can take that, go over there, tell them you're the medic, and pretty much outfit your entire medical kit. And then just as always, the Transpac does a really good job of providing phone numbers and access to physicians while we're on the race. So make sure you have all that stuff handy, and keep, if you have crew members that are on prescriptions or have medical issues, make sure that you have a list of all those. And somewhat of a sensitive subject maybe, but you got to take it seriously, and we're all on a team on a boat for 2,300 miles, so we have to get personal on some things. So the last one in my outline is preparing for the worst case scenario, which few of us on this call have had, and there's no way to prepare is the short answer, but you can be confident, and I think as Robbie alluded to earlier, the next 8 months, go out and do as much sailing as you can. Choose the crew early. Make sure it's the right people. Put them on, do some practice and put them under duress. And in the case of OEX, when we sank, I think the number is 65 or 70 Transpac races amongst that crew, and thousands of miles. We're all good friends. We sailed tons of miles together. Very similar to Robbie's history on Pyewacket, and they're just you put your life in your team's hand, and they put their lives in your hands, and that's kind of how you have to look at it. And so we didn't really have we didn't have a poster on the wall, the checklist that says do this when the boat starts sinking, but what we did have is we had a lot of people that had different skills, and everybody just sort of migrated to their area of expertise and went about their business. So I hit the EPIRBs and the that kind of stuff, and we had a couple of very talented boat yacht designer, boat builder people on the boat. They went right to the rudder or the hull to see what was possible there, and the navigator got on the radio and sent out emails, and everybody just did their job, and we got to go for a sail on Pyewacket for a day too, and we too got to have a fellowship hour. But 10 days worth of wine in one day is a whole nother story, which we'll tell on another day. But yeah, thanks to Robbie and who met us at the dock when we got in. It was turned out just fine. So back to preparing for the worst. Just go out and practice with all the equipment, and the man overboard drill with a real person. John Sangmeister on our boat does that every time we do it. He puts on his famous orange Gumby dry suit, and he loves it. So and we love it, so it's part of what we do. So just time, hours, years together as a crew, and if it can't be the whole crew, then at least have the nucleus. So 4 or 5 people that have done a lot of racing together is really important, because they're going to know what to do. They're going to know how each of the people react under different situations. And just, find each crew member what their strengths are and what they focus on, and let them do it. The other thing, so let's say the rig goes over. Have you ever actually done that? How do you get the rig away from the boat without hurting it? What do you cut first? What do you cut last? What tools do you use? How, what are the steps? Does your Makita grinder have 5 extra, grinding wheels because you're going to burn them up? Did you actually charge all the batteries, the Makita batteries? I guess we won't be able to charge him on Jib's boat because he doesn't have an inverter. So maybe we have a generator. Okay, so, but those are all things. Just do you ever really think about those things? No, you probably don't. If you have Mark Callahan, you probably don't have to think about him, but not every boat has Mark Callahan. So, maybe you should be that person and just, ask the questions, pull the stuff out, make sure it works. Rudders, rigs, all that kind of stuff. If you've never done it, then ask people who have, and, how does that really work? What do you actually do? And, a couple beers at the bar might be involved, but, money well spent. And I think, as always, in chaos, the best person is the one who's just a good teammate, and they take care of their job first. And if that's under control, then they can go help out on someone else's job who's struggling. But the worst thing you can do is stop doing your job to go help another crisis, and then before you know it, you have 2 jobs not getting done. So that's never good. And I just, I do this every day. Every time I lay down in my bunk, last thing I think about is, okay, what am I going to do if it happens? What am I going to do first? What am I going to grab? And all that. And if you just get used to that, then when it does happen, it's not really that big of a deal. Just go about your business. And my last thing in my outline, there's this saying, never step down into a life raft. I don't know who came up with that one, but in our situation, we didn't wait for the life raft to be above the boat. We got into it, pretty early on, and the risk on a lot of these boats, when the rudder, there's a hole in the back of the boat, the boat starts sinking quickly stern first, and we haven't done this a lot. So in our case, we didn't. We thought it might come down really quick, and the rig and the main, which was still up, might come down on top of us. So John Sangmeister, we love John, and he made the call. He kind of looked up and he goes, this doesn't look too good, so let's cut the cord and let's get out of here. So just being aware of your situation, and and don't wait till you're stepping up to the life raft. So that is all I have in my department, and we're doing really well on time. Looks like we have a few questions. So Bill, what do you have for us?
So there was one question for Brian that came in after he was done. I think Joe Bruner saw on the crossover chart, saw the S1 or S2 reference, and he was asking if that was a suggestion to use symmetricals. And he was asking, is there a maximum number of spinnakers, and are code zeros legal for Transpac?
No, the chart that went out in the outline was just an example chart. I personally like asymmetricals offshore. And then Transpac in the NOR has added a line saying there's no restriction number of light staysails or spinnakers. And then code zeros are legal. You're only allowed one of those tweener type sails.
Thank you. And then I think it might have been PJ, I'm not sure. bear with me here. Someone, oh, well, do you want, one of the Jareds made the comment that Cal Maritime is working on creating a safety at sea class for people up in the Bay Area. So if you're up in the Bay Area looking for a class, the US Sailing Site typically lists them, and so keep an eye out for that. Someone asked if being an EMT was a skill that a boat would look for. I know I have in the past. You want to weigh in on that, Randy?
Absolutely. If you can drive, do the bow, and you're an EMT, you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah. And then John Sangmeister's on the call, and he was asked me to remind you to talk about the ditch bag for personal items like phones, wallets, watches. I'm sure there's a story behind that.
Well, yeah, okay. You asked for it. Well, yeah, so we got into the raft, and well, actually before we got in the raft, so our navigator, Brendan Bush, he was, the water was kind of up to his lap at the nav station. So he was kind of feeling like he needed to relocate to higher ground. So he started pulling stuff out of the nav station. He grabbed a dry bag, and that, the little, at every nav station, there's the little mesh pockets that are collectors for tape and wallets and, just about everything. So for some completely stupid reason, John took off his 1987 Stars and Stripes America's Cup gift Rolex watch and put it in the little bag by the nav station. So Brendan's kind of clearing out, and he's looking around and he sees something shiny. Oh wow, Rolex. So he didn't know it was John, so he just throws that in the dry bag or whatever. So off we go. We all get in the raft, and I end up in the raft with Brendan and the dry bag, and it had he grabbed one of our Iridium phones. So we tried to call John's wife first. She wouldn't answer, probably sleeping. So then we call my wife, and she answers, and we're kind of pulling stuff out of the dry bag, and it's kind of like the treasure box at the dentist's office or something. You're not sure what you're going to find, and so then we find the watch, and I go, oh shit, I think that's John's. That's John's. Should we tell him? Like, let's not tell him for a while. So we're in the raft. So we get out of the raft, and by the way, I've said this many times, but the Pyewacket crew was just amazing in that whole process. And, we had a pretty good crew. That they had an amazing crew, and it just went off without a hitch. So we get on board. We're just hanging out on Pyewacket watching our boat sink. And John just kind of looks, he's like all hunched over, really not doing well. And he just raises his head up, looks over at OEX, and he screams a really loud one-syllable word that begins with an F and ends with a K. And we all kind of, we're all scared. We're like, what, did we leave someone behind? What, or did we miss somebody? It's like, no, my effing Rolex. And so Brendan had the watch in his pocket waiting for the appropriate moment to present it to John, and he did, and everybody lived happily ever after. So that's the story.
All right.
All good. Got to have some more questions here, don't we?
Yeah, a couple more. There was a question about whether a rescue diver would be a desired crew skill, and I think any skill that is prefaced with the word rescue is something that will get people's attention. I know we had a rescue diver on our boat, a retired Marine who did that in the military and gave you a little bit of comfort.
Yeah, a thing I really like. So I did a couple races to Hawaii on Medicine Man. Keith Ives, who I think a lot of you know, has a dive service, and he always brings a little mini scuba tank, and it's got a little, mini tank and a little regulator and everything. Doesn't weigh much. And, if you have something going on the bottom of the boat that's significant, that you have to spend some time down there, I think that's a really cool idea, not much weight. And I think that's a great idea.
There was a question about in the NOR, there's an item 2 under advertising. Someone has what they described in the question as corporate friends who want to sponsor the boat. And I think that section's fairly self-explanatory. Basically, we just want to, there's some direction there to indicate on your entry form a description of what you have in mind. And that's mostly just so we can make sure it doesn't create a conflict. And Tom, Commodore Trujillo, if you want to weigh in on that, but I think that it's pretty straightforward, correct?
In section, the NOR2 also points out some world sailing references to go look at and make sure that you're doing it all right.
Then the last one, unless I missed one, the last one was whether adding electrolytes to the water is good for hydration. I know we always did that. I'm seeing some nodding of heads there. Anybody want to weigh in on that?
We do it all the time. It's absolutely part of our routine. You make water maker. Here's kind of a cool thing we have on Good Energy is we've got a water tank. Obviously, the water maker feeds the water tank, but we have a special pump that pumps water out of a clear hose on deck. So when the boys are out and they need to replenish, they don't need to go down to the galley and you just hit a little switch, a little toggle switch on deck, and you just put the hose in your little water bottle. It's probably the coolest thing I've seen. It really works well, and the hydration tablets, for sure, they're awesome. Yeah.
All right, I think I had a question about being a ham operator, whether or not that's a helpful skill.
So, if you don't mind, I'll weigh in on that. It's a very cool thing. Unfortunately, nowadays everything's so digital that the single sidebands and ham radios have gone away, and the reason they've gone away is because they're heavy. They're the whole package of ham gear or single sideband gear can be 60, 65, 70 pounds. And with everything digital these days, it's just not desired on the boats. Now, if you're sailing a really big, heavy boat, fantastic, have it on board. There's still the Pactor modems that will allow you to send and receive emails through the Pactor modem. It's a very cool way to go, and it works for free. You use the SailMail software. It's slow, but let me say it again, it's free. So it's a very cool way to go. And ham radio guys, there are fewer. I'm one of them. I would love for it, the days when we used to sail and talk on the radio. I was lucky enough to do a few Transpacs with Joe Buck. He was a ham, C6I or something like that. And he had a ham radio on board, and we would chat with other boats along the way. And that's sort of sad that that's gone away. It was a very cool time. But they're just, everybody's worried about weight, and radios are heavy. So get them off the boat, and everything's digital, so it's much faster to use a slow Iridium phone than a Pactor modem.
All right, thank you. And one of our board members, PJ Jacqueline, made the comment in the form of a question, but really I think it's a great point, which is the merits of having 2 people on board who are medically trained in case the primary person's incapacitated. Something to think about. And I think the requirements require the first aid training, but if you've ever had somebody on board who's been injured, it gets serious really fast. So the more people trained, the better. And that's it for the questions.
Great. Well, Commodore, I'm gonna ask you to make just a couple of closing comments, but just I want to thank everybody, all the participants for showing up. I hope you got a lot out of it. I really want to thank Robbie Jib and Brian, thank you so much for doing this. Bill for fielding the questions, and just a reminder, Peter Eisler, February 8th, Wednesday. I think it's going to be fantastic. And Commodore, send us off on our way with a few words, if you would.
Great. Well, you're taking care of all the thanks. So, and in particular, thanks to you, Randy, for taking on the job of seminar chair and obviously drumming up a lot of excitement for this one.